This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Guten Moed. Thank you very much for coming and joining us this evening for the learning of Torah Hashem, Be'ezras Hashem Yisbarach. As always, we begin B'Rishus L'Mord Asra, or of Landau, with continued appreciation to all of you for coming and making the shir possible as we learn dedicated and loving memory of Esther Bas Tzvi Hirsch Klaus and Miriam Liba Bas Rebaran, my Rebbetzin. They should have a lichtige Gan Eden, be Melitzis Yoshe for their family, for all of us and all of Klal Yisrael, sponsored by the Klaus and Rapp families, and for the speedy recovery of Shlima Bas Betya, Shendel Shlima Bas Betya. She should have a refuah shalema b'sech she'achel Yisrael. We also learn with the tefillah that all those that have been touched by the dread machla, known as Yana Machla, other related diseases, should have refuah shalema b'sech she'achel Yisrael. All of us and our loved ones should always be healthy. We should enjoy lange gesunte zisa shalom bayis, parnasa berach v'chavod. All those that are awaiting children should be blessed with zarachai v'kayama. And all those that are awaiting a shidduch should find a shidduch quickly and easily. We gathered today for this special shir. It's been many years that we didn't have a shir on Chol Hamoed Pesach. I was away, and since I was in town this year, I decided to give a shir about Krias Yam Suf and Shvi Shel Pesach. It says, "V'al Yom Loku Chamishi Makas." The Yam, there were 50 Makas. So it used to be that Rishonim wrote poetry. It used to be that Rishonim wrote in verse. Some of the great Gedolei Yisrael wrote the piyutim, and some of them were written in poetry. The benefit of poetry is that it makes the reader think about what he's saying, and it lingers longer. When something is with a rhyme, it lingers with you. Like the rhyme, Lashon Hara Lamed Hey, go to Gehenim the easy way. If I just tell you Lashon Hara gives you Gehenim, it doesn't have the staying power as Lashon Hara Lamed Hey, go to the Gehenim the easy way. It lingers longer. From the very great Rishonim, the Ibn Ezra wrote poetry. And Rabbi Friend, in his Haggadah, brings a poem. Sometimes poems don't necessarily have to rhyme. They're written using a combination of words. They don't necessarily have to be in rhyme. So the Ibn Ezra wrote a poem about Krias Yam Suf. And I want to read it to you because it has some important messages. The poem went as follows: Arbo umdu alayam. 4 categories stood by the sea: Tzur, Tzir, Tzayin, V'tzar. Again, Tzur, Tzir, Tzayin, V'tzar. Tzar, Heitzik, L'tzayin. Tzayin, Tzak, L'tzir. V'tzir, Chanan, L'tzur. V'tzur, Tziva, L'tzir. Say the Teitzei Tzayni miyad say the Cholat Tzayni miyad Tzar. That's the poem. So what's the story behind this poem? What's Sur, Tzir, Tzon, Tzar? What is that talking about? So Rav Weinrib wrote a piece to explain this poem. 3 of the things in the poem are obvious. The tzayin is Klal Yisrael, like it says in Tilim Tzayin Marisecha. The tsar is Mitzrayim. Tsar is the enemy, the adversary. That's Mitzrayim. Right? So it's interesting because the root of Mitzrayim is tsar. It's the enemy. Mitzrayim could be read Mitzarim, from the enemies. B'tzeitz Yisrael mi Mitzrayim, Right? It's from the enemy. Tzur is, of course, the Rabbeinu Shalom. Hatzur Tomim Pa'alai. Right? Tzurenu, Tzur Chayenu. What's Tzir? Tzir is the mystery. So Tzir, which means a shliach, or it means a hinge, or it means pain, Tzir refers to Moshe Rabbeinu. And we'll explain that. So here's the fourth thing. Abo omdu alayam, four stood by the sea. Tzur, that's Hashem, but Tzir, Moshe Rabbeinu. Tzayin, the flock, that's Klal Yisrael. Vitzar, and Mitzrayim, the 9 million Egyptians that were trying to drown us. So now the whole poem makes sense, right? Let me read it again. Abo omdu alayam, Tzur, right, that's Hashem, the rock, Vitzir, Moshe Rabbeinu. Tzayin, the flock, that's Klal Yisrael. Vitzar, and the enemy, that's Mitzrayim. Tsar heitzik l'tzayin. The enemy was pursuing the flock, the sheep. Vitzayin tzak l'tzir, and the sheep cried out to Moshe. Vitzir chonan l'tzur, and Moshe Rabbeinu asked supplication to Hashem. Vitzur tziva l'tzir, and Hashem commanded Moshe, say, v'cholatz tzaynim yatzar, go and rescue my sheep from the enemy. So that's the poem. What is the lesson from this poem? So Rav Weinrib says that the lesson is calling Moshe Rabbeinu Tzir. So on the one hand, Tzir means a shliach. It says in the pasuk, Tzir neman l'sholchav, a trusted agent to the ones that send him. And Tzir means that the Rabbeinu Shalom was a shliach neman, that there was nothing that, some people, they do a job, but they look for what's in it for themselves. Moshe Rabbeinu was nothing in it for himself. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu's name is not mentioned in all of the Agada, except incidentally. By Aminu Hashem of Moshe Avda, where he's specified as Moshe Avda, he was the shliach neman. Tzir is also a hinge. So a hinge unites the door to the door to the house. So Rav Weinrib says that since the hinge unites, it was the job of Moshe Rabbeinu to unite Klal Yisrael. And he did that. Vayichan Sham Yisrael neged har, ki ish echad b'leiv echad. He united all of Klal Yisrael. That's the job of a leader. It's a job of a leader to unite the people. And people tried to tell me that the mission statement of my shul should be no talking in shul. I told them, there's a halach of no talking in the shul. There's a halach of not sitting in somebody else's makom kavua. There's a halach of not standing too close to the door. Those are all halachas. They're important halachas. But a mission statement is shalom. Misha shiken shmoi b'bayis hazahu yishken b'nechem shalom v'shal v'ava v'achva v'shalom v'reyes. That's a mission statement. That's the job of a leader, to unite people. So Moshe Rabbeinu was called the Tzir, which unites the door to the house. That's what Rav Weinrib wants to say. And Tzir also means pain. Tzir v'chav le'leida. Because Moshe Rabbeinu felt the pain of Klal Yisrael. V'yar b'sivloisam. That's what Rav Weinrib says. I want to say something else. The job of a hinge is to connect. It connects the door to the house. The job of Moshe Rabbeinu was to connect Klal Yisrael to Aviyam Shebashamayim. That's the job of a leader. The job of a leader is to connect the people around him. That's what a Rebbe does. A Rebbe tries to connect his Hasidim to Hashem. That's what a Rav is supposed to do. He's supposed to connect people that are wrapped up in their mundane lives, to connect them to Hashem. And that's a mamish famous Gemara. The Gemara says that Moshe Rabbeinu says, Mo Hashem alekecha shoyel me'ima kiyim liyira. What does Hashem ask but that you should fear him? So the Gemara says, V'chi yira milsa zutrasi. Is yira a small thing? So the Gemara says, in the Moshe Rabbeinu milsa zutrasi. For Moshe Rabbeinu it's a small thing. So the Marsha asked, but Moshe Rabbeinu is not talking about himself. He's talking about Klal Yisrael. So is it a small thing to everybody else? And what's the Gemara answering? L'Moshe Rabbeinu, but it's not talking about Moshe Rabbeinu. So Maharsha says, if you lived with Moshe Rabbeinu, it was a small thing. Because that's the job of a leader, to unite people to Hashem. And the same thing is true with the Tat and Mama. If they want to lead their homes, their job in Chinuch is to make the children feel Hashem. B'chol drachecha do'ehu. With the making of brachas, with the saying of Be'ezus Hashem and Be'imiyatz Hashem and B'yisiyata D'Shmaya. The job of a parent, of a leader, is to make Hashem's presence felt in the home. Now, the fact that Klal Yisrael is called Tzayin in the poem is also important, because if you remember, that's why Moshe Rabbeinu was chosen to take Klal Yisrael out of Mitzrayim. He was a roya, and Hashem saw that there was one sheep that was sick. Instead of pushing him and kicking him and pulling him, he took him on his back and carried him. And Hashem said, if that's the way you take care of your flock, I want you to take care of my flock. That's why Moshe is the same letters as Miseh. It was from the way he took care of his sheep that he was given to be Roy Yisrael. So that's sign. But there is a big kasha on this poem. Because what does it say? Arba Omer al Hayam, 4 stood by the sea. And by the way, that's another thing. We have a new 4. And I have a feeling the Ibn Ezra wanted to accentuate that this was another 4, right? We have, by the Seder, we have 4 sons, 4 kaises, right? 4 kashas. This is another 4. 4 stood by the Yam. And one of them was the Tzayin, and one of them was the Tzir. So it says, if you look back at the poem, it says that Tsor Heitzik L'Tzayin, the adversary, the enemy, oppressed 9 million Egyptians, chased the Jews to the sea. V'tzoyin soak l'tzir, and the sheep cried out to the hinge, to Moshe. Why didn't the sheep cry out to the tzir? It says tzir chanan l'tzir, the hinge, Moshe Rabbeinu supplicated the rock, right? That's Chanan. Moshe Rabbeinu was specific to use the lashon of Chanan. V'es Chanan. He knew that they were basically Aram ve'Erya, except for the Mila and the Pesach. So he was Chanan. He asked for a freebie, right? Like it says, V'es Chanan el Hashem. Of the 10 lashonis of Tefillah, Chanan is the most, right? Chanenu me'yitcha de'ah binu v'askel. So Moshe was tzir chanan l'tzir, but why would Tzayin sak l'tzir? Why didn't they cry out l'tzir? The teretz is that that's the chinuch that they needed. They should have cried out to Hashem. You never misdirect your cries. Right? That's why it's dangerous to put a picture of a Rebbe up on the wall of a shul. You never cry out to the Rebbe. You never cry out to the mace. You could ask the mace to be a Melech Yosef. You could ask Hashem to help you in the schus of the mace, but you never cry out to the mace. The Tzayin Tzak L'Tzir was a mistake on Klal Yisrael's part. And the Ibn Ezra probably knew it because Hashem said, Matitzak Eli. Why do you cry to me? He didn't say Matitzaku Eli. He said Matitzak Eli. Right? So they didn't cry out to Hashem. They cried to Moshe. Later on, they would learn this. They would learn that you only cry out to Hashem. A Yid cries in Tefillah to Hashem. That's the source. That's why we say in Tehillim, we don't have any concept of confessional by the Jews, right? By the Goyim, they could go to confessional. We say, Ki imcha haslicha lamanti vorei. With you is forgiveness that we should fear you, nobody else. Ki imcha haslicha. Forgiveness is only by you. There's no confessional. Can't get forgiveness anywhere else. Ki imcha haslicha lamanti vorei. And by the Yam, what does it say? Vayar Yisrael es hayar gdoila asher asa Hashem b'Mitzrayim. We know that besides doing a mitzvah, there's the bare bones of a mitzvah, and then there's the hidden mitzvah. I mean, you could have on Shabbos 3 meals, you could have 2 challahs, and wine for kiddush, and a kazayas of meat, and finish. Then there's a hidden mitzvah, right? Echol mashmanim, shisei mamtakim. Right? Eat fatty things, drink sweet things. Right? You could have a pair of tefillin, or you could get beautiful ksav, and you could get a very nice cover to your tefillin. Right? There's an inner of hisnor lefon of the mitzvahs. Where do we learn out hidden mitzvah? Hidden mitzvah is very important, by the way, for olam hazeh. Because it's brought down, schar mitzvah b'hay al maleka. Reward for a mitzvah is not in this world. But there is reward for hidden mitzvah. But it's a very slippery slope, hidden mitzvah. Here's a person that the Rav sees that he spent $300 on an esrog. The Rav says, wow, what a nice esrog, it's clean. Or a chassid, he buys an esrog medagartel for $400. But he doesn't pay full tuition. That person has his priorities all messed up. What, so the Rebbe should live in poverty because he wants an esrog with a gartel? Before you buy a Mahudadik esrog, you have to pay full tuition. You can't take a break on your tuition and then buy silver covers for your tefillin. Yeah, he has silver covers. It cost him $2,000, silver covers for his tefillin. But he doesn't pay full tuition. That doesn't make sense. So hidden mitzvah is a tricky business. You can do hidden mitzvah, but first you have to pay full tuition. But don't get silver covers for your tefillin on the backs of the Rebbe who's not being able to pay his tuition. But hidden mitzvah, where do we learn it out from? We learn it out from Krias Yam. By Krias Yam, it says, Zeh keli v'anveyu. This is my God, and I will glorify Him. And it says, what does it mean? How do you glorify God? Will you hang up tapestries in the heavens? How do you glorify God? You get a Yud Kei Vav Kei, and you put a curtain on it? How do you glorify God? So the Gemara says, Hisnor lefon of the mitzvahs. You glorify God by beautifying mitzvahs. That's how you glorify Hashem. So Rabbi Friend asks, why does it teach us the concept of hidden mitzvah by the Krias Yam, by the Yams? It's an interesting question. Why, of all places in the Torah, hidden mitzvah is 613 mitzvahs, 248 positive commandments. It could have taught us hidden mitzvah anywhere. Why does it teach us hidden mitzvah by Krias Yam? So he quotes a Rav Cheshin from Mir Yerushalayim, who gives the following answer. He says that we know that by the Yam Suf there were 250 miracles. That's what he does. We learn out, the last opinion, Rabbi Kiva, that it teaches us that in Mitzrayim, Laku b'chamishim makas. And that was an etzbah. And by the Yam it says Yod HaGedolah. So how much is 5 times 50? 250. It teaches you that there was 50 makas in Mitzrayim and 50 al Yam. Many miracles by the Yam Suf. By the Yam Suf, it says, for example, that if a Yid was thirsty, then he stuck his hand into the wall, and he took out fresh water, not salt water, and he drank it. It says fruit grew from it says Nermu Mayim, a lotion of Arema, a pile, there were piles of fruit. It says fruit. So there was a miracle that the floor wasn't muddy. Right? They went Becharova on the dry land. It says that the wall between, it split into 12 highways, that Krias Yam Suf Gems, into 12 highways, and the water froze, but the water froze, it didn't become opaque, it became see-through. It was a miracle. A lot of miracles. Now, why did Hashem, for the short amount of time that they were going through, why did Hashem make so many miracles? Because Hashem wanted to show that He loved us. So He didn't do the bare bones, but He did many Hidurim. Many Hidurim. Just like Hashem does many Hidurim, then when we do the mitzvahs, we should do many Hidurim. That's Rav Cheshn's answer. That's why it's the Makar for Zekei Livan Vei. It's a beautiful answer, but I like to give a different answer. Which I think is closer to the truth. I mean, they both could be true. Torah is Nidrashis B'Shivim Panim. But I want to give another answer. Listen carefully. When a person knows somebody casually and they have to do something, they'll do the bare bones. Listen, I said I would buy a few Sidurim for this shul. No. I'll buy a few Sidurim. But if somebody's buying a siddur for his kala, then he buys a leather bound, he goes in and finds the best siddur with the best translation. You're going to do Hidurim if you know the Rebbeinu Shalom. If you have a relationship with the Rebbeinu Shalom. It says, Zeh Kei Levi Anvei, Zeh Rosh Shivcha Yama Shaloi Roy Yecheskel Ben Buzi B'Meisel Merkava. We saw the Eibishter. Oh, you see the Eibishter, then you do a real good job. Zeh Kei Levi Anvei. When a person does Hidur Mitzvah, that means they have a relationship with the Rebbeinu Shalom. Their tefillin is their most important possession. Their talus is the real big day Shabbos. That's their Hidur Mitzvah. That's why we learn Hidur Mitzvah from Krias Yam Suf. Because if it teaches us that if it's like we see the Eibishter, if we have a feeling for the Eibishter, then we're just not going to do a mitzvah, and then we're going to make it. We love it. Then we're going to do a Shena mitzvah. That's why we learn Hidur Mitzvah from there. And remember, it's well worth it to do Hidur Mitzvah, to make a Shena Shabbos, to have a good pair of tzitzis. People buy tzitzis. The tzitzis are such shvacha maises. Tzitzis is shkula keneged kol mitzvahs. Shkula keneged kol mitzvahs. So tzitzis is B'gematria 600 with the 5 knots and 8 threads, 613. When people buy these tzitzis, they're short. It says it's supposed to cover you if you were standing only in tzitzis. They buy small pair of tzitzis. And they buy these weak strings that right away start shredding. Get tzitzis, even your talus cotton should have talus gadol tzitzis. They should be at least 24 by 24, at least. That if you stand up only with the tzitzis, it's not the fun of a mitzvah. There's reward for Hidur Mitzvah in this world. Schar mitzvah by Al Maleka. The guys of Yam Suf Ligzorim. He cut the Yam Suf into paths. You know, the Shinova Rebbe is not so long ago. Shinova Rebbe was one of the Divrei Chaim's sons. The Shinova Rebbe relates, as it's brought down in the Haggadah of Olei Tzadikim, that he met a very old woman who was the granddaughter of the Noyim Elimelech Mlezhensk. And he asked this woman, do you remember anything from your saintly Zayda? So she said yes. She asked him once, what was Krias Yam Suf like? So he took a little basin of water and put his hand in the water, and the basin split. The water split. And he said, that's how Krias Yam Suf was. This is not so long ago. Not so long ago. I'd like to point out, I didn't mention enough times from one of my favorite Beis Aaron Haggadah, the Per Aaron Hashem Yinkim Damai. Per Aaron says, Uvnei Yisrael holcha b'yabasha b'seich hayam. He says that b'yabasha is an abbreviation b'yud beis shvilin halachu. That's b'yabasha. B'yud beis shvilin halachu. With 12 paths they walked. Now it says l'geizer Yam Suf l'gezarim. He cut the Yam Suf. Now it's interesting that we call it, all of us call it Krias Yam Suf. But the Lashon HaKra is never Kriya. It says l'geizer Yam Suf, and it says Boikei Hayom Lefnei Moshe V'Tibaka Hamayim. So it's called B'Kiyas Yam Suf and Gezeris Yam Suf. So why do we say Krias Yam Suf? That's not a Lashon HaKra. And I believe the reason is because they say that the Yam just didn't split. It was torn. So that as we were walking, we kept on having to have Amunah. It was like a zipper opening up. And as we walked, it kept on splitting ahead of us. So every minute it was a challenge for us. And where do we see this in the pasuk? Because it says, Hayom Ra Vayanas. The sea saw and fled. As we were walking, it fled from us. So it kept on fleeing from us as we walked. Now we all know, it's brought down that water all over the world split. I believe that, although I couldn't find it today, I wanted to find a source for it, but I couldn't find it today. But I've seen it in the past, and my chaver Yitzi Kurtzer told me he heard it from a rebbe of his also a while ago, that there are reports of the water splitting back in China. Although China wasn't around, the Chinese weren't around at the time. But there are reports in that area of the world that water is split. The Chinese weren't around. They're relatively newer, the Chinese. But in that area of the world, but water all over the world split. And we learn it out because it says, Uvaruach hapecha ner mumayim, the water is piled up. Nitzvu kamoid neid noizim, kafu sa'imais b'lev yam. So the end of the pasuk, kafu sa'imais, that the deep congealed in the heart of the sea, that's the Yam Suf. Ner mumayim is all over the world. Why did the sea split all over the world? So you have to know, there's an incredible Ramban. The Ramban writes on the pasuk, "V'chazakti esleiv Paro, v'rodaf acharei." I hardened the heart of Paro, and he chased after them, and he pursued after them. Says the Ramban. It's a really dramatic Ramban. I'm going to quote him. Says the Ramban, "Ve'ein bekol hamoivsim pelik hazeh." With all the fireworks that were going on in Egypt, there's no wonder, there's no pella like this that Paro went into the Yam. V'zeh be'emes shigoyin lahem. The Ramban says it was madness. I mean, Paro saw that all the makas were given, all the wonders were done for Klal Yisrael, not for the Egyptians. V'samti pedus. Right, he passed over the Jews' house, not over the Egyptians. Everything, right? Lice was only by attacked the Jews, the Egyptians. Right? Everything, locusts were only by the Egyptians. And Paro goes into the Yam. What did he think it was going to split for him? Didn't he know he was asking for it? Ramban says that it's a blinda pella. V'zeh be'emes shigoyin lahem. Comes the great Stipler of. And the Stipler says even Mishugayim have to have a reason for doing something. The Stipler says he remembers that when he was young, in his hometown in Europe, there was a Meshuggah on top of the roof that started throwing rocks down on people's head. And people were yelling for him to stop, and he didn't listen. He said until one Kluger Yid came with a scissors and showed him the scissors and said if he doesn't stop, he's going to cut the pillars of the house and he's going to fall down. And the man ran away. How could he cut pillars with the scissor? If you're a Meshuggah, it could happen. But the Meshuggah also has a thought process. So the Stipler says, what was Paro's thought process? So he says, if you look at the pasuk Ner Mumayim, the Targum Yonasan ben Uziel translates Ner Mumayim from a lashon of armimus, cleverness. Chakimu Maya. The water was crafty. Says the Stipler, the water split all over the world, so Paro shouldn't think that it was for the Jews. So if it was for the Jews, then why is the water splitting all over the world? It must be a phenomenon now. Do you know that in Korea, twice a year, there's a water that splits the Gindi River? Splits. They have a crossing. I saw pictures of it. It's a Pella de Kazakh. The Gindi River splits. There's mamash a Krias Yam. Twice a year in Korea. I believe it's South Korea. I saw pictures of it. It mamash splits. It's a fascinating thing. So when he saw the water split all over, he thought it had something to do with the moon. It's a phenomenon of nature. It had nothing to do with the Yidden. Chakimu Maya. That's Chizak Leif Para. Remember, Pella de Kazakh. So I'll tell you the truth. The fact that Hashem hardens the hearts of our enemies, v'chizakti es Leif Paro. If we want to see this blatantly, we see it from the blood libel. And Rabbi say the blood libel is still with us as we speak. Some of you might have seen in the news, on clips, you might have seen the terrible tragedy in Siberia of the Cherry Mall. There's a 4-story mall in Kemerovo, Siberia, that had a fire in a cinema. In Russian-style way, the fire escapes were sealed. And by the time the fire was put out, at least, probably a lot more, but at least reported 64 people died. 41 of them were children. Now, why do I mention this? It happened Erev Pesach, and it didn't take long for Russian papers to carry that it's a Jewish conspiracy for blood for Pesach. To get the children's blood for Pesach. Even today. Even the fact that the Torah is an open book and they know that we're forbidden to have dam. And they know they read the whole story of Passover. They have the Talmud too, and there's never a mention of blood. It makes no difference. Do you know that there was a blood libel in America in 1928? In 1928, here in this land, in upstate New York, there was a blood libel. In a small town called Massena, New York, there was a Yiddish community with 100 Yidden, with an Orthodox shul, an Orthodox Rav. A 4-year-old girl went missing Erev Yom Kippur. Mary Griffith went missing Erev Yom Kippur. Barbara Griffith, not Mary Griffith. Barbara Griffith. And they accused the Jews of capturing her for her blood on the holidays. Twist. For Yom Kippur. And they arrested the Rav. They summoned, I don't know if they actually arrested him or summoned him in. Rav Beryl Brennglass was his name. They arrested him or they summoned him for questioning. They held him for an hour. And they released him because the girl walked out of the woods. The girl was found alive. They didn't stop it. They said that she was released by the Jews. She was released by the Jews because the rabbi was taken into custody. And it took very high government shtadlonis to get the mayor to issue an apology. This is in America in 1928. And this is now in 2018. And Baruch wants to remind us we're in Galus. So the sea split into 12 lanes. So there's a very fascinating psikta to Rav Kahana. You know, it's important. We're going to have Shvi Shel Pesach. We want to be able to celebrate. You know, the composition of Pesach is very easy to understand because we got out of Mitzrayim on the first days of Yom Tov. And Eretz Yisrael the first day. Then after that, we had quasi-days. On the one hand, we had the Anon and the Amud Eish protecting us, but we were quaking in our boots because we were chased by 9 million Egyptians. So that's the days of Cholamoid, Nishtayin, Nishter. And then Shvi Shel Pesach is Krias Yam Suf. With Shvi Shel Pesach is Krias Yam Suf. We have to know as much as we can about it. So it says in the Psikta to Rav Kahana that when Rabbi Yochanan was explaining the miracle of Krias Yam Suf, he said the water is piled up like the construction of a dovecot made out of reeds. The walls were like thatched walls of reeds. All of a sudden there's a commotion in the Beis Medrash, and a woman appears in the Beis Medrash out of nowhere, materializes. It's a psikta Rav Kahana. This woman materializes and she says she's Serach Bas Asher. No, Serach Bas Asher never died. She went to Gan Eden alive after she was 1,000 years old. She was Yiviyotze Mitzrayim. She saw Malchus Beis David. So Serach Bas Asher appears and says, no, it wasn't like thatched reeds. I was there, and it was like a wall of glass. It's an amazing thing. Now, why does Serach Bas Asher come back? She doesn't come back often. She doesn't come into the Beis Medrash to interfere with the machlokeses of Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. What's Serach Bas Asher coming back to tell us how the walls looked? Obviously, it's very important how to visualize Krias Yam Suf. We're supposed to visualize it. And Serach Bas Asher wanted to give us the right visualization. You know, there's a famous Me'amloyes, because that was one of the miracles. Me'amloyes says one of the miracles was that when the water froze, water that freezes is usually opaque. But this water was transparent. So the Me'amloyes asked, why does the Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't do Nisim Bechti? Why did he make that it should be transparent? It's a beautiful Me'amloyes. He says Hashem made 12 paths. Why did he make 12 paths? Why did he make one path? Hashem made 12 paths to show that in a true Torah, Avodas Hashem, there could be different paths. That's why there's 12 short. That's why it's acceptable. There's Hasidish, there's Misnagdish, there's Eidos Mizrahi, the Svardim. It's different paths. And the reason why it was transparent is that each one should see eye to eye. Something a lot of people have problems with. These Hasidim, those Svardim, those Litvaks. People have a problem with it. That's not the Ratzon Hashem. That's what Haman says. Yesh namechem mafuzah mafud yesh preda beinayim. There's divisiveness. No, the Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't want that. Rabbi Shalom wants an aguda achas. It could be different mahalchim. It could be different mahalchim. But an aguda achas have to see eye to eye. So she came and corrected Rabbi Yochanan. So it's interesting. Rav Zilberstein asks a question. Rav Zilberstein wonders, why did Hashem make that Tzerach Bas Asher should come? Why didn't Eliyahu come? Usually it's Gili Eliyahu. What's happened to Tzerach Bas Asher? Teretz says if Eliyahu would come, it's Loi Bashamayim. But Tzerach Bas Asher was a bystander. She saw it. She wasn't giving a psak. She was telling you what she saw. That's why Tzerach Bas Asher came. It's also equally important that she came back. It's not easy to come back from the other world. It's not pleasant. It says when they came back, they were given something so that they shouldn't smell the stink of this world. To them, this world stinks. She came back because it's important to try to visualize Krias Yam Suf. V'shiket tzarenu b'seicha. He drowned our enemies in the Yam, and we know a miracle happened that afterwards the Yam expelled the Egyptians. V'yar Yisrael es Mitzrayim meisim al svas hayam. Right? We should see that our tormentors died. So the Torah Tamima, Rav Epstein, Torah Tamima relates that he spent 10 years by his famed uncle, the Netziv of Volozhin. He was Rosh Shiva of Volozhin. Bala Shiltus, he wrote the Pirush on the Shiltus, the Hamak Dover on Chumash. So he relates that while he was by the Netziv one Motzei Shabbos, a Yid came in with a sad shaila. This whole shaila is sad. Yid comes in and says that he had a partner for 12 years and they had a very big fight. They couldn't resolve it. They broke up the partnership and he made a shvua that he'll never look at his partner again. And he said all the years he kept the shvua. He said the partner just died. And he says he wants to go, according to Minig, and now look at him and ask him mechila. Never people have to die for people to ask mechila. It's such a sad thing. Why do people have to wait for people to die? The people that never speak to their parents or their sisters or brothers and go to the funeral. Why do they have to wait for people to die? Their life is so short. It's pathetic. But anyway, this person wanted to know, is he allowed to go and look at the mace when he swore that he wasn't going to look at him? So they were talking about it, and Rav Epstein said, we just read it in the Torah. So the Netziv asks his nephew, what do you mean? So he says, the Rabbeinu Shalom says, Ki asher re'isem es Mitzrayim hayoim, as you see Mitzrayim today, lo yisaysifu l'roisam oid me'olam. You'll never see them again. Lo yisaysifu l'roisam oid olam. And then it says, V'yar Yisrael es Mitzrayim me'isal svas hayom. So you see, when it says seeing, it means seeing alive. Because otherwise, what does it mean? You'll never see them again. So you see, seeing when one's dead is not considered normal seeing. So the Netziv was maskim and told him that he could do it. He would tell later his nephew that there are pearls in the Torah that you have to mine. You just mine the pearl from the Torah. I wanted to add an explanation. Why is it that seeing a person when they're dead is not considered seeing? Because true seeing of the person is seeing a person's neshama. When I say I got a good look at a person, it means to see the person's neshama. And that you can't see in a dead person. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol niyeh b'dvaro. V'niyeh paro v'cheiloi b'yam suf ki l'olam chasdoi. He shook Paro and his warriors in the Yam Suf ki lo'olam chasta. There's a wonderful Haggadah, which I wish I had more time to learn with you this year. Will be future years, Be'ez Hashem. By Rav Ben Zion Abba Shol, the Or Tzion from Porat Yosef. Very, very, very big tzaddik in Talmud Chacham. So he writes, "V'niya par b'chelo b'yam suf ki lo'olam chasta." It was mida keneged mida, as Rashi says, "B'mayim dimu la'abdam, v'heim avdu b'mayim." B'mayim dimu la'abdam, and the mayim he plotted to destroy them. They were destroyed in the water. He quotes the Gemara in Saita and Avches, "Shebemida sha'adam made in life." Now, in other shiurim, we've talked about this extensively. But what does it mean? What does Rashi mean? B'mayim dimu la'abdam. It's a very big problem. No one of these 9 million people ever tried to kill Jews in the water. The last Jew to be put in the water was Moshe Rabbeinu. Right? We know after Moshe Rabbeinu was put in the water, the astrologers said, we see that the Mashiach Shel Yisrael was put in the water and they stopped drowning people. So that means Moshe was the last one to be put in the water. How old was Moshe now? 80. So no children were put in the water for 80 years. So that means the last person that put a baby, let's say he was 20 years old, so that would mean that the person would have to be 100 years old now if he put some baby in the water. You think any of the people chasing the Jews were 100-year-olds? There's an army, they didn't have 100-year-olds. So what's pshat b'mayim dimu la'abdam? What kind of mida keneged mida is it? So the Maril Diskin asked the Kasha. And the Maril Diskin gives two answers. One only the Maril Diskin could give. Maril Diskin says first that these 9 million were Gilgulim of those 100-year-olds. That's one answer that he gives. So they're receiving punishment as Gilgulim. The other answer he gives, because then you have to know what does it mean, B'mayim dimu la'abdam. In the Mayim they were abdam. So you'll say, yeah, but the Medrash says that afterwards they got out of the water and they came out of the ground. Revava kitzemach hasod and nesatech. So it was only dimu la'abdam. So Maril Diskin says you're learning Rav Pshat and Rashi. The Mayim dimu la'abdam meant that the 9 million Egyptians were trying to push the Yidden into the sea. That's the Mayim dimu la'abdam. It wasn't referring to Kala ben Ayila Tashlicho at all. But Mayim dimu la'abdam means that he tried to push them into the sea now. That answers another kasha. It answers Sam Sofer's kasha. Sam Sofer asks, if it's mida keneged mida, why didn't they drown in the Nile, in the Nilus? The answer is that they were being punished for trying to push them into the Yam Suf. So that's why they drowned in the Yam Suf. Okay. So, but Ben Zion, Chacham Ben Zion Abba Shol uses this as a springboard to impress on a person that you always have to think in terms of mida keneged mida. He says if something happens to a person small or big, a person has to ask themselves, why? What's the mida keneged mida? Sometimes it's a painful diagnostic. Right? Many Mefarshim say that's pshat. When the Gemara says, Nachbasa derchenu, im yisurin barn ala adam, yefashmish b'maisav, or yemashmesh b'maisav. So the Gemara says, Pishpeish v'lay motza, yitla b'vitl Torah. So the famous kasha is, what does it mean? Pishpeish v'lay motza, yitla b'vitl Torah. If you were pishpeish, then you found that you weren't mevatel Torah. You went through your day. If you were mevatel Torah, you would have found it. So the Pashim Shat Yitla B'Bittul Torah is that Pishmeish B'Lay Matzah Yitla B'Bittul Torah must be because you're an Amoritz. And the reason why you didn't find anything is because you don't know that you're doing Averis on Shabbos, because you don't know Ilcha Shabbos. You don't know you're speaking Lashon Hara because you didn't learn Hilchos Lashon Hara. So pish peish b'lei matzah yidla b'bittul Torah because lo yamar etz chasid v'lo bur yorei. But there's another pshat. When it says pish peish, it means seek out something midah keneged midah. Why do you have a headache? What were you doing wrong with your head? Why does your feet hurt? What are you doing wrong with your feet? Where are you running to? Pish peish v'lo yatsa yitla b'bittul Torah. Because Talmud Torah keneged kula. I remember many years ago when I gave shir on WNYM radio, and the people called in, and my Rebbetzin Allah Shalom was sitting in the other room, and she was taking phone calls, and sometimes she would slip a piece of paper to me with a question. So I said this word, and somebody sent in a question, so why does a person have lower back pain? And I said the reason why lower back pain is so common is because the spine controls so many activities. So there's so many things we could do wrong with the spine. So it's interesting that Reb Ben Zion Abishol quotes a Rashbam. He says the Rashbam says that when the brothers said, Ma zois asa elikim lanu, when the Shvatim said, Ma zois asa elikim lanu, so the Rashbam says, B'mida keneged mida, what's the mida keneged mida that we're being accused of spies? They were trying to figure out what the mida keneged mida was. Ma zois asa, that's my Rashbam. That's the way a person is supposed to think. So he says about himself that one time he was giving shir and he had a very bad toothache and it was giving him trouble concentrating on the shir. He says he didn't understand why, and then he said he realized that he was writing a tshuva on technology and he had to take out a secular book, and it was on the side some apicursus, and he glanced at it with his peripheral vision. He said that's why he was being punished. He says that he was affected by paralysis in his right hand, and he thought, what's the midah keneged midah? And he says it must be that he wasn't writing his Chidushei Torah, and he started writing the Or L'Tziyah. He says it was asked halacha, he always answered on the spot. It was asked halacha, and it was nelam from him. He closed his eyes, and then he remembered, and he gave the answer. And he told the Talmud, I didn't close my eyes because I was thinking about where the halacha was. I closed my eyes to think about what the midah keneged midah was. And I realized that on one sefer somebody said something not nice, and I didn't protest, and I asked for forgiveness to Hashem. And then I remembered. On midah keneged midah, there's a very fascinating story in the Haggadah of Rav Elyashiv. Very fascinating story. Midah keneged midah. There was a bar mitzvah boy. I don't have to tell you how a bar mitzvah boy prepares for many months for his parsha and his haftarah. This bar mitzvah boy prepared. He knew it perfectly, and he was a good Baal Nigun as well. He gets to shul on that Shabbos, and the gabbai goes like this. He has a problem. There's another boy that has his bar mitzvah as well. He didn't realize it. They both won a lane. They both prepared for months. So our bar mitzvah boy in question did an amazing thing. He says, I won on my bar mitzvah. I've learned what it means to be a mavater. I won on my bar mitzvah to be a mavater. He gave up, not to split it, not nothing. He said, let the other bar mitzvah boy do it. 2 years to the day, his mother takes very ill and is hospitalized. They don't have a lot of money, so they get the regular, not fancy doctor. Doctor has no idea what's wrong with her. Happens to be that Shabbos, Rav Elyashiv is in the hospital. And they have a minyan, but they don't have a Baal Korah. So this young boy who's now 15 says, I could lane. It's my bar mitzvah parsha. And he lanes flawlessly. Flawlessly. And Rav Elyashiv was so impressed He calls him over, he gives him a bracha, he asks him what he's doing here. So the boy starts crying that his mother is here, and the doctors don't know what's wrong, and they can't afford a good doctor. Rav Elyashiv's doctor was a world-famous doctor. Rav Elyashiv asked his doctor to please go in and see what's the matter with her. And he goes in, and for no money he diagnoses her, and she got better. He got paid back for being mevater his bar mitzvah parasha, and he had the great covet of laning for Rav Elyashiv, the Gadol Hadar, the Pesach Hadar, and getting his mother to have a refuah shalem. The midah she'adam meided in life. We have to know this is a big lesson of Krias Yam Suf. That's why we find the unusual thing of that Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu said that Hashem Yelochem lochem v'atem tacharisha. You're not to touch an Egyptian. Why was that so necessary? What was the midah keneged midah? You have to understand that the Germans learned so much from Egypt. The whole capo system was based on the shoitrei b'nei Yisrael. Pharaoh told the Egyptians, you don't hit the Yidden. Let the Yidden hit the Yidden. He set up shoitrei. Let them hit them. Pharaoh didn't want to get his hands dirty. He told Shifra and Pua and the midwives, in Beinu v'amita noitza. He told the Yidden, Kol ben hayiloi ra'yoret tashlichu. You throw them in. Hashem says, you had Jew kill Jew? First I'm going to make it that there's going to be a civil war. And the Becharim will come and say, you're not letting them go? We don't want to die. Moshe Rabbeinu is batting 1,000. 9 out of 9. We don't want to die. Let them go. And when they didn't, it says, L'makem Mitzrayim bivchoireyem. Now it says in the Haggadah, Zu acherev. That's referring to the civil war. It says the Egyptians killed more, the firstborns killed more than died in Makkah's Keferis. That's Egyptian killing Egyptian. That's midah keneged midah for Jew killing Jew. But then, 11:15 could be here. Yeah. Then after that, Hashem went further. He says, the Egyptians will drown themselves. You won't touch them. Hashem yelochem lechem v'atem tacharisha. That's why we have to be very careful. Very careful when it comes to Krias Yam Suf, when it comes to how we treat others. If we yell at people, one day people will yell at us. If we're not patient with people, one day when we need patience, a doctor maybe, won't be patient with us. Ashrei maskil oldol b'yom royim alteo Hashem. Hashem tzilcho al yad yaminecha. Dal malamaylo, you want to know what's in store? Mimcha, look at yourself. Mimcha is midah keneged midah. The way we behave, that's the way we're treated, both for bad and for good. It's a very important lesson in life. We want to thank all of you for coming and making the shir possible. Chananya ben Akashya Amar Ratzah HaKadosh Baruch Hu L'Zakos Yisrael L'fikra Chir B'Lehem Torah Mitzvahs Shenemar Adinoi Chafetz L'man Tzidkoi Yagdul Torah V'Yadeh.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.